Our first touch of the day, long ball number one for October 21st, 2024. Did MLS Decision Day live up to the hype, Jason?
I would say, such as it was, going in, we knew there weren't a lot of things to play for on the final day of the season. But yeah, I think it did. I mean, you did. So in the Eastern Conference, Lionel Messi coming on as a substitute, collecting a hat trick, playing a ball. What are we calling that? A hockey assist, a secondary assist that leads to a goal for Inter Miami. They run rampant over the Revs. What was it, 6-2 on the day? I think the Revs were up 2-0 in that game before Miami went crazy, Robert. And then in the Western Cup, I mean, down the table in the East before I move on, the way things went, DC United knocked out, Atlanta saving themselves and getting in, pain for the black and red, and obviously good things for the Five Stripes. There's some drama there. I mean, we can argue about whether it's good for mediocre to poor teams to be in the playoff field, Robert. They expanded 9 teams from each conference playoff field. But in terms of those fan bases and those teams, that was certainly some drama. And then in the West, I was watching as it went down, as LAFC found a way to get themselves in a position to be in first place at the end of the day in the Western Conference, watching the scores, keeping an eye on the Galaxy, who are in Houston. The Galaxy get a late penalty to draw level against the Dynamo, and it looks like the Galaxy are going to finish top the table in the Western Conference, only to have the Dynamo come down and find a goal from Daniel Steres, an ex-Galaxy player who puts the dagger in. Just pain for the Galaxy fans. They went nuts at BMO Stadium or whatever it's called out there in Los Angeles. So, a wild day for sure.
Yeah, Steris getting that goal, you just chalk that into it's a funny old game sort of a category. Like who would lay the dagger? But one of the players you swept aside not too long ago.
A great header, like a fantastically placed header from a defender off a very good cross. I think it was trying to remember who put that cross in. I had it in my head, now it's gone. But
the guy down the right-hand side.
Yeah, the guy down the right-hand side put in the cross to kill the Galaxy's hopes of finishing first in the Western Conference. Yeah, it was quite a moment, and they even, when I was watching MLS 360, watching the Spanish version. That's just me working on my Espanol. Yeah, I'm watching the Spanish version, and they cut to Los Angeles, and the fans in that 32-52 are looking at their phones. They're like, "Oh my God! The Dynamo scored! The Dynamo scored!" And they're going bonkers. And it was, again, those two teams were going to make the playoffs. Those two teams are favorites going into the postseason tournament. That nothing changed on the final day with that, but there was that. It's pride for LAFC to be out the Galaxy, or for the Galaxy to lose that spot to their in-city rival, and then there is that matter of, when we get down to it, will LAFC end up hosting an MLS Cup final? Will they host a Western Conference final potentially against the Galaxy because of that single goal, that big moment, the turn in added time in Houston?
That moment that you're talking about with the LAFC fans looking at their phone, looking at the scores, that was like the most parallel to the relegation day overseas, when everyone's like listening to the transistor radios, listening to the scores to see who's going to go down. That was the most parallel to that sort of situation. Clearly, the fans were really into it, and there was a lot of passion on the line, hoping for an MLS Cup final to be hosted, much more likely with that result. And I got to say, that was probably of the season, that was the most quality, like MLS After Dark. That was the late night watching MLS was kind of how I took in live MLS games in years past. And that's been, trimmed down quite a bit with the new Apple deal. So it was entertaining, and I enjoyed that late evening, dramatics there on decision day. So the things that could have happened kind of did play out. The minimal things that were on the line did come to pass. But with that said, was there any playoff bubble finishes that were notable, or should we move on to the MVP candidacy?
No. Let's look at the standings, because I think we have the MLS final standing. Eastern Conference first, because that's where my brain goes. I don't know. I don't go left to right. I go where all the people live to where the people go. Huh? I am an Eastern Conference bias kind of guy. This is where the Supporter Shield team plays in the Eastern Conference. Inter Miami, top of the table, 74 points, breaking the record. Again, it wasn't just driving home that Lionel Messi is the greatest player we've ever seen in this league, the greatest player any of us ever seen, period. And perhaps, I think, and I mentioned the controversial Messi content we're making. When I say controversial, I mean that we talked on Friday about how Messi probably didn't deserve MLS MVP because he hadn't played enough games for Inter Miami this year, and they were good when he wasn't on the field. But he showed why he's going to win this award, right? We saw it on Saturday night that he comes off the bench, he gets the hat trick, he sets up goals. What has he got? 20 goals now on the season in whatever 19 games, 20 games, I guess at this point. I think it was 20 games. The assist numbers are obviously incredible as well. So Inter Miami top of the table. Columbus finishes second. FC Cincinnati in third. Nothing was going to change there. Orlando City in fourth place. Charlotte, NYCFC, Red Bulls. I mentioned this. CF Montreal improved their spot by one. They will now host that play-in game. Atlanta United gets into the playoff field at the expense of DC United. Look, if you look at this, I feel bad for Troy Lisette. CF Montreal also doesn't deserve to be there. I will say that. I feel bad for Troy Lisette and DC United. They had some moments. Benteke had a great season with 23 goals, and we'll get to that with the MVP discussion. But, when your goal difference is minus 18, it's really hard to argue you deserve anything. We knew Toronto was cooked. Philly misses out on the playoffs. I mean, Philly, think about how hard done they are. And again, you got to win games, right? I don't have any real, I don't have any real sympathy for the Union. Although I do have a Union. I like the Union. I'm not a fan, but I do like the Union. I like Jimmy Curtin. I like what they managed to do, sort of despite their limitations budget wise. But you look at that record. They scored 7 more goals than they gave up, and they lose out and getting into the playoffs to Montreal at minus 16 and Atlanta minus 3. Right? And their goal difference is better than both of the New York teams, and it's barely different than Orlando City and Charlotte. And they just couldn't win enough games. Those losses, 15 of them piling up, 10 draws. You take 3 of those draws and turn them into wins, and you're in the MLS Cup playoff. 2 of them probably, I think, is enough to get you into the field. So
that's definitely an oddity of any table when you see 4 teams ahead of them with a negative goal difference. That's peculiar season there.
I mean, that's MLS though, I think is the point. Okay, let's look at the Western Conference now. Go out there where, of course, LAFC on the final day of the season. Looks like it's not working. I think maybe that's my fault. We'll just talk about those standings instead of looking at them because this is a live show.
Ponder upon our Western Conference.
It's what happens. So LAFC, there it is. LAFC beating out the Galaxy by what? By goal difference, right? Because they have the same number of points, they have the same number of wins. It's just goal difference with LAFC 1 goal better than the Galaxy, and both of them really good. I mean, by MLS standards, plus 20. I think we've had some really big numbers in the past couple years, but those are solid numbers. Obviously, RSL finishing third with a win on their final day. Seattle Sounders, I think that was a draw against Vancouver, right? They end up in fourth, but that does mean home field in that first round of the playoffs for them. Houston gets the win, but doesn't get a chance at a home field advantage. It's not hosting because it's best of 3 and all of that. But Minnesota United, Colorado Rapids, Vancouver, Portland, and then Austin, Dallas, St. Louis down the table. I would say this about the West, Robert. The teams that are in are the teams that deserve to be there. Right? This shook out in the Western Conference where you say, I mean, again, I think 9 is too many. I'm not arguing 9's not too many. But I don't see a team that's in the playoff field where I'm like, oh, that's a trash team. That's a terrible team, or they don't deserve to be there. Austin, Dallas, St. Louis, Sporting, and San Jose were clearly behind everybody else. And it's not like a quirk that you end up with a field that stops with the Timbers, who have an MVP candidate of their own, who I think is going to get left out of most people's discussion.
Yeah, it seems justified, a little bit more straightforward in that table than on the East with that plus minus anomaly. Austin 5 points behind Portland. 18 goal difference spread. Definitely much more clearly defined. The good and the bad there in the Western Conference.
Okay, yeah, there it is.